Jonathan Carter had always been a skeptic. As a journalist for the local newspaper, he had covered countless urban legends, debunking them with hard facts. But when he received an email from an anonymous sender about the Rake, a creature that lurked in the shadows, he couldn't resist investigating. The email contained a single attachment, a grainy, night vision photo of a pale humanoid figure crouching outside a bedroom window. Curious but doubtful, Jonathan decided to visit the location mentioned in the email, a desolate cabin deep in the Blackwood forest. His research had led him to whispers of missing persons and unsettling sightings. The legend was old, stretching back centuries, but its modern resurgence was what intrigued him the most. The journey to the cabin was unnerving. The deeper he drove into the forest, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. A dense fog slithered through the trees, muffling all sound. When he finally reached the cabin, his gut twisted, the sensation he hadn't felt in years. The drive was long, the road winding and choked with gnarled trees. Jonathan parked outside the decrepit cabin. The wooden planks were rotting, and the front door hung on broken hinges. As he stepped inside, the pungent odor filled his nostrils. Decay? Something had lived here recently. He turned on his recorder. This is Jonathan Carter, investigating supposed sightings of the Rake. His voice echoed eerily in the empty space. Then, he saw them, long, deep claw marks gouged into the wooden walls. They weren't haphazard. They formed a pattern, almost like a message. The air in the cabin was thick, heavy with a presence he couldn't explain. He set up his equipment, placing motion sensors and cameras in strategic locations. Outside, the trees swayed in a breeze he couldn't feel. Something was watching him. Jonathan decided to spend the night in the cabin, setting up his camera and voice recorder. As darkness fell, the forest became unnervingly silent. The wind stopped. The insects ceased their chirping. Then came the whispering. A low, guttural voice murmured incoherent words just outside the window. He turned, heart pounding. Through the cracked glass, he saw movement. Something pale and impossibly thin. The whispering grew louder. Not one voice, but several, overlapping and distorted. Jonathan grabbed his flashlight and moved cautiously to the window. The whispers ceased the moment the light cut through the darkness. There was nothing there, or so he thought. The whispering ceased abruptly. A cold dread washed over Jonathan as he inched toward the window. He aimed his flashlight at the trees. A pair of milky white eyes stared back at him. The figure was hairless, its skin stretched tight over an emaciated frame. It moved in unnatural jerks, its limbs bending in ways no humans should. And then, without warning, it vanished. Jonathan stumbled back, breath coming in ragged gasps. He had prepared for this, mentally, at least, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. He checked his camera. The footage was nothing but static. Something didn't want to be seen. Morning brought no comfort. Jonathan stepped outside to examine the ground, expecting footprints. Nothing. No broken branches. No displaced soil. As if the creature had never been there. Yet he knew what he had seen. He walked around the cabin, searching for any signs of movement. At the base of a tree, he found something disturbing. A pile of small bones, meticulously arranged in a spiral. A warning. Determined to dig deeper, Jonathan visited the nearest town, questioning locals. Many refused to speak. Some made the sign of the cross. But one old man, Earl Fisher, invited him into his home. People go missing, Earl muttered, staring into his whiskey glass. Folks hear things at night, see things. Jonathan pressed him for more, but the man simply shook his head. He slid an old newspaper across the table. The headline read, "Family disappears in Blackwood Forest. No traces found." The date, 30 years ago. Back at his hotel, Jonathan reviewed his recordings. At first, only static. Then, a whisper. "Leave." His breath hitched. He rewound. "Leave or die." He froze. The voice was distorted. But beneath the static, he swore he heard another sound. Breathing. Slow. Deliberate. In perfect sync with his own. Sleep eluded Jonathan. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Rake's pale face. Its hollow eyes bore into his soul. Then came the dreams. Visions of himself, sitting paralyzed in his bed while the creature crouched at the foot, watching, waiting. It whispered things he couldn't understand, but the intent was clear. It was coming. Jonathan's cameras failed overnight. Every device malfunctioned. Someone, or something, didn't want him recording. He checked his laptop. The files were corrupted. Only one remained. He played it, heart pounding. The screen was dark, but the audio remained. Breathing. Then, a deep, guttural growl, followed by a scraping sound, nails dragging across wood. He wasn't alone in that cabin last night. More digging led him to a string of unsolved cases. Campers, hikers, even entire families vanishing without a trace near Blackwood Forest. One police report stood out. A ranger had found something disturbing near an abandoned campsite. A single word carved into the dirt. Run. A woman named Lisa agreed to talk. She had seen the rake and lived. I was 12. She whispered. It came into my room. Sat at the end of my bed. I couldn't move. She lifted her sleeve, revealing deep scars along her arms. It whispered to me. Said it would come back. Jonathan asked her what it had said exactly, but she hesitated. Not words, not exactly. It was like it was inside my head. Her voice wavered. It told me I belonged to it. Now, Jonathan returned to the forest, his gut screaming for him to leave, but his curiosity overpowered his fear. He found more claw marks on the trees, forming strange symbols. They looked like warnings. But there was something more, a pattern, a story etched into the bark, a trail. As he followed, the claw marks grew deeper, more erratic. Then he saw something chilling, his own name, carved into the wood, fresh, bleeding sap as if the tree itself were weeping. All Fisher revealed an unsettling truth. Blackwood was once home to an ancient cult that worshipped something inhuman. They performed rituals, offerings. Then they vanished. Jonathan found an old, crumbling journal in the archives. It detailed their last recorded sacrifice. A man who had trespassed afar. The final words scribbled in ink barely legible. He comes in hunger. Jonathan began seeing the rake everywhere, behind trees, in reflections, even in his peripheral vision. It never fully appeared, but it was there, watching. Then, his phone buzzed, a message with no sender, a single image. His motel door, taken from the hallway. Lisa called him. Did knows about you. You need to run. Before he could respond, the line went dead. His heart pounded as he checked the locks. The motel door rattled violently. A shadow passed beneath the gap. Then, silence. He reached for his camera, but something was wrong. The lens was shattered. His reflection in the broken glass looked distorted, stretched, until he realized it wasn't his reflection at all. It was the rake, staring back at him. Jonathan barricaded himself in his motel room, but at 3 a.m., he awoke. Something was inside. The rake stood over him, its breath rancid. Jonathan couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then, pain, sharp claws dragging across his chest. Somehow, he broke free. He ran, never stopping, until he reached the highway. A passing trucker found him, bloodied and shot. Jonathan left town, but the nightmares never ceased. He knew the rake was still watching. Years later, Jonathan received another email, a new photo, a new sighting. It would never end. He stared at his reflection in the screen, but in the background, just beyond the shadows, a pair of white eyes watched him. Thanks for watching. If you love this video, please give a like and subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss any update from us. Share this story with your friends.